Well, next to Lebanon, where families of those killed in last year's port explosion say once again politicians are obstructing justice in the case. The lead investigator has been forced to suspend his inquiries at the request of the former Minister of Interior, Nohad Mashouk. He's one of a raft of politicians who's suspected of negligence related to what happened at the port, where more than 200 people were killed. Now, today, survivors and families of those who lost their lives are gathering outside the Justice Palace in Beirut. And France's Foreign Affairs Ministry has said it is disappointed that the investigation is being paused. Well, to discuss, our Foreign Affairs editor Armen Georgian is with me in the studio. Armen, what do you make of this news? Because this isn't the first time that the investigator in this case has been forced to pause his work, is it?
No, it's not the first time, and we saw those pictures just now of people protesting, gathering after this decision to suspend Judge Tarek Bitar. Bear in mind that these families of the victims have been getting together quite regularly because they feel that they're not being listened to, that justice has not been done. There was, of course, a much bigger event, Nadia, for the first year's commemoration of the port blast, but this was a slightly more low-key affair. I just spoke to our correspondent in Beirut who was there. She said it wasn't such a huge gathering, and L'Orient Le Jour, the newspaper there in Beirut, said that they thought there were about a few hundred people who gathered. So a slightly subdued and obviously very sad atmosphere, because these families really feel that Judge Bitar is their best hope at the moment, or he was until he was suspended from this investigation. He was their best hope of trying to actually get justice done, because of course he was trying to question some powerful figures in Lebanon's political scene. But it's unfortunately for them not totally surprising that this has happened, because as you said, the previous judge on this probe was also pushed to one side and sidelined essentially when the heat started really rising and the pressure started mounting on powerful figures in Lebanon who obviously don't want to be investigated and who want to make sure that the political establishment essentially is insulated from all this, with keeping the current immunity rules in place, because obviously once you allow one individual's immunity to be lifted, you're setting a precedent that the whole facade of immunity could essentially come crashing down eventually. That's not what those who are in powerful positions want.
And Lebanon had got a new government several weeks ago. They're promising that they will continue to investigate what happened at the port, also that they will tackle some of those systemic economic crises in Lebanon. But do people really think they're going to bring about real change in the country? Because many of the faces in this new government, notably the Prime Minister, were in previous governments as well.
Well, some of the faces are the same, but also crucially, remember how this cabinet of experts was named. It was by political parties doing deals, and this means that the government has a very similar problem to the previous one, which also had a cabinet of experts, but that had also been named by the political parties. That means in the previous government, the political parties had a lot of influence on what the cabinet could and could not do, particularly when it comes to enacting these big economic reforms that the international community is demanding. And so if this is now the same dynamic of, the same situation of political parties, the big factional leaders in parliament essentially pulling the strings from behind the scenes, then that doesn't bode very well for carrying out these big economic reforms. Lebanon can, of course, still continue to benefit, if that's the right word, from humanitarian aid. That kind of emergency aid will probably still continue to flow into the country, but that doesn't solve the bigger and deeper problems, which really need to come through budget assistance. And this is what the Lebanese government says it wants. It wants budget aid from other countries. But how's it going to get that without first getting these big reforms through? And how are they going to get the big reforms through if they've got the factional and sectarian leaders saying, maybe we don't really want to go so far with this reform or that reform? So there is a risk of this government, I'm being a bit pessimistic here, obviously, but being stuck very much like the previous one got stuck as well.
All right, Armen Georgian, we'll see what happens. Thanks very much indeed for your analysis there.